was chasing me. He wanted that intimacy. And I'm thinking the black man's going to help me. He running too, ducking. We both running and ducking from the bird. And so the Caucasian man, he just bent over, you know. All he did was bend over, put his head down, and the bird came and sat on his shoulders. And he grabbed the bird, and the bird sat on his fingers, just as calm as ever. And he walked the bird in the house, and he put him back in the cage. I said, oh, Lord. And I said, why is it that her bird was trained? He said, no, her bird had just had his wings clipped. I said, what? Clip his wings? And, you know, can you imagine my mind? I would have probably cut the whole wing off. No, there's a part of a bird that makes him fly, that keeps him flying, right? And so you have to get that part of him clipped, because I got it done. And it's not the whole wings. I was thinking about that. I said, I know the bird had wings, you know, at the nail shop. What do you mean clip his wings, you know? And so the bird rejected me from that day forward. He rejected me. The bird didn't even want me. Oh, that was a long story because almost 10 minutes. But my point of it is, the birds were in cage. I have to come back with this testimony because I have 15 seconds. I'm not even finished. But the bird in San Antonio, he rejected me. When I used to go up to the cage, he started pecking the cage. Once he put him back in there, well, he didn't have the same love affair with me. He began to peck the cage. And I was so hurt because it was like I hurt his feelings. The bird had feelings, and I hurt his feelings. And so I thought about the birds up in Louisville. That I brought that story out because they told me that the bird in San Antonio, when he got outside, he wouldn't survive in that environment. And they called, they called him house nigger. They was kidding though. They said he's a house nigger. And that means he wouldn't be accepted outside, because there are outside birds, and then there are birds we raise to be inside. And they can sense him. They can sense him. The outside birds can sense him, and they will kill him because he's not like them. And so the birds on the inside of the house in Louisville, they were such birds. And the Lord showed me those birds, and he said, I didn't create them to be encaged. But remember, they were symbolic for something. And as I looked at those birds, they were behind the cage, but they were so lovely to look at. And so I got convicted, and I said, okay, I'm going to set these birds free. You know, I'm going to set them out into the wild. And I said, well, no, they won't live. So I didn't know what to do with the birds, but I was so convicted. And the Lord told me to stand still. Well, one day I came in, and Andre was dying. He was dead. No, that was me. No, that was Andre. Andre was dead. The male bird was dead. And I said, oh, the male bird died. And I didn't find him. Someone else found him. And that was someone that really couldn't stand us. He was one of the ones started most. Well, let me just say, my kid's father found him. He came over to the house, and I wasn't there, and he found the birds, and they were dead. Well, one of them was dead. It was the male bird. And the difference between the birds, you can see the difference, because the girl had more like a yellow on her and a light green, and the boy, he had like this cockatoo thing under his neck. He had a difference. You can tell him from the girl bird. And I didn't see the male bird. Now, mind you, my ex-husband knew nothing about the symbolism of the birds. And one of the reasons I wanted to get rid of the birds is because I didn't want to keep them in the cage. And I knew what the bird stood for. But I couldn't keep them in the cage because I thought something would happen to him on the outside. And so he took the bird. I had left the house by then. I was staying in a motel in Louisville. And I would come back and forth because the in-town suite man, when I took the bird over to in-town suites, he said we couldn't have birds on the inside. And so I had to go and take him to my kid's father. And I used to go over there to the house and, you know, do some chores when he had the kids, and the birds were there. And the bird, he called me as soon as I left his place to get the motel. He called me and said one of the birds were dead. And so I went back and I said, well, what happened to him? He said, I threw him in the trash. I said, you threw the bird in the trash? And normally kids like to have like a ceremony. And so the one female bird was left. And so I told him, I said, take her out, because the Lord had impressed on my heart. You know, take her out. Now listen to this. This is going to mean a whole lot. The Lord said, take the bird out and put him on top of, he had a Suburban. Put him on top of the car. It was white. And let her go. Okay? He had to do exactly what I said. And this is awesome. And God, even as I talk, the Lord is bringing back so much. There was symbolism. And it was a spiritual debt. It wasn't a physical debt. And he threw him in the trash. The same one. There was the same. And I hate to go deep into the testimony because I don't want to pick at anyone. I can't tell my testimony like I want to because I'm not trying to pick at anyone. But it was my ex-husband. that was really on to Andre. I mean, the reason why the people actually pressed against us so in Louisville was because of my ex-husband at that time. So I told him, I said, I want you to take the bird out and put him on top of the Suburban. Now, vehicles to me is a sign of ministry. And the Lord has always given me vehicles as being ministries. Now, transportation, like airplanes, buses, and boat, those are signs of sickness. I used to have dreams back in the days. The Lord has given me dreams, and when I dreamed of snakes, and I look at their colors, because the colors mean something. I can tell you some testimonies, even of my life, when I dreamed snakes, I saw snakes, and they had certain colors, and God showed me there were people in my life and what type of hatred they had for me. Red, they would have red spot, which means anger, hatred. Yellow spots, that would mean envy or jealousy, and then orange spot would be envy. And so that's what snakes. But vehicles, if it's a transportation system like an airplane or a bus or a boat, that always means sickness. And I used to have dreams, and I had dreams about someone being in a bus. I had a dream one time Jeremiah was going to be in a bus, and he came up sick. You know, he was very rarely sick, but he came up sick. But when you have dreams about regular cars and vehicles, that's ministry. And so, and I told you about the ones with the cat, and I was in an Escalade, and my ministry was being hindered. I was in a black Escalade, and it couldn't get off because the school was in front of the graveyard, and I couldn't get out. There was no way out. And so I kept going in circle of the school, and the ministry was big, but there was a darkness upon it, you know. But this time it was a Suburban. My ex-husband had a Suburban, and he couldn't put me on the ground, for it would put me low in ministry. He had to put me on top of the truck. That symbolizes the height of the ministry, the greatness. And I said, open up. And I'm the only one in the cage now, because remember, the birds were symbolic. And I said, open him up and let him fly. It had to be done at his hands. And so he said, nah, I'm not going to let that bird go like that. I said, no, you have to do it. He hesitated. But then eventually, after I told him the testimony of what God gave me, he felt so sad in his heart because Andre was spiritually dead. And he was in Louisville. His name was so torn up. They had all types of rumors out there, even at his church, and he struggled. And Andre, at that time, he was a catering person. He had to fit in. He had to become, please them. He was shut down. I mean, he became a great preacher, but he wasn't that at first. And I must say, and I'm not trying to brag, I told Andre when I was there, we used to ride around in Cherokee Park, which is up in Louisville. And we sat there one day, and I said, Andre, the Lord has shown me some greatness in you, but he allowed his church, because he grew up in that church, and he allowed the information they had of him, his past and the rumors and whatever else was going around, to hold him back. But he was great. And sometimes we do so much sin, even in preaching, and yet the Lord still uses us. And so, I mean, it was my preaching that brought me out. When I was stuck in my situation, it was me having to preach that brought me out. And so the Lord urged Andre to get out there. And I remember they said how he preaches now. Andre's on fire. I remember he went up to the radio station and he wouldn't preach. And I was trying to encourage him to preach with me. And Andre wouldn't preach because he was, inside of himself. And so the Lord said, you have to move away. I had to move away from Andre because Andre was focused on men. And, God already branched my wings out. But what happened to that bird determined my attitude, right? And so the Lord showed me that Keith put the bird out on the car. And so he called me, and I said, what happened? He said he was happy because I told him the story. The bird flew. He said, I stood there and I watched him, and it didn't matter where he flew to.